Before I ask this question, I want to encourage women to use the cervical check cancer screening services. It saves many, many lives every year. Taoiseach, on the 11th of November 2020, I asked the Minister for Health how many legal cases have been issued to date in relation to cervical check. He replied to me that there have been 164 cases as of the 11th of November. That's an incredibly high figure, Taoiseach. Each one of those representing a woman with cancer and a family forced to fight for justice in an adversarial court system. Deputy Catherine Murphy asked the same question 2 weeks later, and she was told that there was 231 cases as of the 25th of November. Again, Taoiseach, a shockingly high figure, given the fact that Leo Varadkar promised the Dáil that no woman with cancer would have to go through the courts again. Leo Varadkar promised that a tribunal would actually bring this to an end, and that promise has not been fulfilled. Now, either the department has made a mistake in relation to these figures, or in the 2 weeks between those questions being asked, nearly 70 women initiated legal cases against the state in relation to cervical check. An incredible figure, and if it's true, a massive indictment against this government. Patricia Carrick died in November. God rest her. The High Court case she took found that in 2016, smear test was read in a manner which was neglectful. Patricia was diagnosed with cancer in 2019, a year after that scandal first broke, and I raised her question in the Dáil. And since that contribution, I received a letter from Cervical Check critical of my contribution. So what I did was I took a meeting with the clinical director of Cervical Check to try and trash out these issues and better understand the situation. And I am shocked, Taoiseach, with regards to what was stated at that meeting. During the course of this engagement with Cervical Check, they made their position clear. They disagree with the decisions of the Supreme Court, they disagree with the initial apology of the government, and they disagree with the compensation of many of these women. These are extraordinary statements, Taoiseach, for a crisis that has gone on for years, and so many individuals have had such difficulty with this. Cervical Check is an arm of the state. The government and the Supreme Court are also arms of the state. How can so many organs of the state be in direct contradiction of each other? And Taoiseach, does this not put lives in danger?
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach.
Well, first of all, I'm not privy to the meeting that you had with the head. Is the head of Cervical Check?
Cervical Check. It was the
clinical director of Cervical Check. I'm not aware of the obviously it wasn't at the meeting, so I'll check that immediately because we all have to uphold the decisions of the Supreme Court and of the courts within our system. In my view, the previous government's decision, again, those who work for the state, they can have their views in terms of government decisions, but they have to work with government decisions and facilitate the carrying out and execution of government decisions, of course, within various services, and that remains the position. I think the government, since it came into office, has been doing everything it can to facilitate the establishment of the tribunal, to create a less adversarial forum for women who have taken cases to the courts in order to give a better alternative to the courts. And during the summer, towards the latter part of the summer, judges were selected and appointed because the previous judges had either been appointed to different positions or had moved on because of COVID-19. There was a pause during the first phase of COVID, and we were anxious to get the tribunal operational for women who wanted to lodge claims through their legal representatives at the tribunal. And I think that was important as well, that we would get it established. Now, there were obviously ongoing discussions with the 221 Plus group. It's fair to say they weren't satisfied with that all of the issues that they had raised with the government were resolved, particularly one in relation to recurrence. The the statute of limitations, which the government at its decision a fortnight ago took a decision on statute of limitations, which I believe ultimately will enable that issue to be resolved. Obviously, it's in the first instance, it would be a matter for the tribunal to decide in any case that feels has difficulty because of statute of limitations. But because the tribunal started later than women would have been have expected, then there was an obvious delay in being in a position to lodge their claims. In terms of recurrence, that was well debated in the House here during the passage of the legislation, and the legal issues that were raised then by the then Minister are the same legal issues that have not enabled the government to deal with that in the context of the tribunal. And there are far wide-ranging implications beyond cervical check in terms of the recurrence issue. So the government is very committed to seeing through the work of the tribunal, to facilitating a less adversarial, less confrontational and a more suitable environment for the resolution of these issues, where the labs would be joined as third parties, not as co-defendants, but as third parties, because negligence has to be established, as you know, and the tribunal follows the work that was initiated by Justice Charles Meehan. In other words, he recommended the framework and then followed through on the act that was passed by all parties in the House here last year. So as far as we're concerned, on that side of it, we believe genuinely that the tribunal offers a better, less confrontational alternative than the courts.
Taoiseach, the fact that we're talking about the tribunals in the future tense at this stage is an incredible situation. It's an absolutely incredible situation. Now, the Patricia Carrick case struck me in a number of ways. First of all, it struck me, how could a government fight her in the courts practically up to the end of her life? It was an incredible situation. And she's not the only person who has been in that situation. But it also struck me that she had taken a number of smear tests before her diagnosis, yet she was never, her tests were never part of any review. The reviews commissioned by the Department and the HSC only focus on slides of women who had been diagnosed with cancer. So Patricia's slide was not re-examined until it was too late. So it struck me that we are only re-examining slides if the woman has already developed cancer. In many cases, again, if it's too late. So given the incredibly high number of women who are going through the court system, that doctors are saying in some of these cases that the smear tests, when first read, should have been seen in flashing red lights. And given the tragic loss of life to date, does it not now make sense, Taoiseach, to review a sample of the slides of the asymptomatic women to see if we can catch these cancers while we can still treat them?
Well, again, I think in the first instance, we should draw a differential between a screening programme and diagnostic procedures in themselves. I think that's very important, and if in some respects the original cervical screening programme, in my view, didn't give or gave a sense that if you come through the screening programme, you're okay. But that is not, as we know, the case. And I think all screening programmes are general population screening programmes. Sorry, where there's a problem then, and where negligence has been established, of course the labs are negligent in terms of that respect. The labs gave an indemnity to the state in respect of that, which is why they're still, in the context of the tribunal and in the context of the courts, joined as third parties. But in the broader sense, I think each case can be different. I don't think we can make generalisations in relation to this, or can we kind of create schemes and frameworks due to subjective analysis of a particular case or screening analysis. So a doctor, cervical check screening has never been, under the older technology, the most precise of screening programmes. And I think most would acknowledge that. But
cases are finding that there are also mistakes beyond the margin of error.
Well, the ones, anything beyond the margin of error obviously needs to be pursued and dealt with, and compensation should be paid.